a Midnight Waffles podcast.
This is BattleStations, a podcast about the Columbus Destroyers and the Arena Football League. I'm Frank Walker. Thanks for joining us again this week, folks. As always, we're presented in conjunction with AFLFanzone.com. So jumping right into it this week. From last week, I think we had, 3 or 4 signings on the books. This week, we pretty much have a football team. Reviewing, where I'm looking at it through is ArenaFan.com has a really cool free agency tracker where it kind of lets you know where things are. The team's official website keeps putting up kind of little articles, but I don't know, it's not as concise as this. And it really what it does, it gives you a good idea of where the player was, if they were even in the league last year or whatnot. The thing that becomes very apparent looking at this is how many guys are going to be playing for the Destroyers this year, or at least who are going to be in camp, who are going to be rookies as far as what's going on. And most shows don't do it this way, but I figured because it is kind of the meat of what we're going to be discussing right off the bat there, that we're going to discuss the question that was asked of us on Twitter here. I think it was actually done through a Facebook page there. Yeah. Dave Williams asked, how many players can be signed and when do cuts need to be made? Please post a link for your show. So I'll try and get that out there for you, Dave. So where we're at with arena football, and it's a little harder to track down because a lot of the other major sports, you can actually, if you want to, and if you want to bore yourself to death, you can go read their full collective bargaining agreements. The Arena Football League is a little more buttoned down than that. So, but what we know of how the league is set up, teams are allowed to sign up to 35 players. Now, the cut downs from what we're hearing this year is going to be April 20th, and you're going to cut down to 24 players. Now, when you're talking about the Destroyers, I know a lot of people have been contacting the team, wanting to do tryouts and all that cool stuff, and they're doing the public tryout Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, at the Bo Jackson, I think it's called Fieldhouse or whatnot, out in Hilliard, Ohio. But the team right now is at 28. So I think what they're looking for is they're looking for a pretty high level of athlete. I think with arena football, some guys fall into this idea that, hey, I was really good in high school, I can probably make it in arena football. These guys are good. It's the same kind of thing you hear about most professional athletes. People talk about them like, oh, that guy's bad at this guy's bad. And I'll actually share a story from all my time covering hockey. A few years back, there was a real fun story in the NHL where a gentleman by the name of John Scott was elected to the All-Star game. Now, John Scott was not in any way an All-Star NHL player. He was mostly known as kind of a fourth-line grinder. He got into fights. He just was not known as a high-skilled guy. But as a push from fans, he was voted into the All-Star game. Well, he performed well in the All-Star game because All-Star games are just fun little exhibitions. But later, he was retired, and I heard a story where he was playing just kind of a pickup hockey game with some folks in Canada, and some of the guys were like, "Oh, well, John, we might be able to keep up with you here." He was like, "What, really?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, this guy, he played for a year or two at Wisconsin, and this guy played at another college." And the idea was that because John Scott wasn't a great all-star NHLer, that they thought they could keep up with him. But the moment they dropped the puck, and this is a guy who is retired. It's not like he's a brand new NHL player. He's had better days as far as his playing skills, and he just played. He could skate circles around him and a stick handle around him, and there was nothing they could do. And that's what it is in this type of stuff. The closest example I ever had was when I was in high school. We played this silly flag football game at my church on Thanksgiving Day, and I was like 17 or 18. And the older guys brought in a ringer, a guy who he'd played nose tackle. I think they said he'd played in an Arena League game or two. And he played nose tackle, and he played at Navy, and they lined him up at nose tackle. And he just annihilated me all day long. There was nothing I could do. It was useless. I mean, that's the thing. These guys are incredible athletes. So if you're going out there, good luck to you. But yeah, so we're at this point, the Destroyers are at 28 guys. So if you want to make that team, again, got to be at a high level. Who they've picked up from other Arena League teams. Nick Seether, a defensive lineman. Kareem Smith, offensive lineman and defensive lineman. More of a veteran there, 39. Varmasani, great defensive back out of Albany. Larico Stevenson from Philadelphia. Derek Summers from Albany. and Terrence Taylor, defensive lineman from Baltimore. And the big thing where I think they really surprised a lot of folks was picking up players who had not played in the AFL last year but had played previously. Julius Gregory, a wide receiver who'd played last in 2017 in Washington. Sam Longo, a lineman who'd played last in Orlando in 2016. The big name, I'm not just going to read them all off to you, but the big name was Donovan Morgan, wide receiver who played in Los Angeles in 2016. One of the few guys to ever get, I think he might be the only guy to ever get 2,000 yards in an AFL season, which is ridiculous considering how small that field is. It's amazing. And then a collection of other wide receivers, defensive backs, linemen who've never played arena football, a bunch of rookies. So it'll be interesting to see how this season goes and how this all plays out. There's currently 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Greg McKee, who'd played in Philadelphia last year, and then Travis Tomowski, who'd played at Ohio College. Let me double check which one it was here. Yeah, he played at Ashland. And then another quarterback who I think news just came out today of, Grant Russell, who played his high school in Newark, Ohio, and then played at Ohio Dominican and had a good career there. So arena football is similar to the NFL in that not all the guys on this roster today are going to be there come the season opener. And that's where we are right now. And we're going to see some of these guys are going to be there. Donovan Morgan is going to be there. I have to think that between Travis Tomowski and Grant Russell, that's going to be a competition for that backup role. And the only reason I say that is Greg McGee played last year a couple games for Philadelphia when their starting quarterback was hurt and played really well in the Arena League. And for these guys to step into camp in the Arena League and to try and be better than him, for both of them to try and make the team over him, because with a roster size of 24, it's hard to believe they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. So we'll see where it goes from there. I'm interested to see what happens with it, but yeah. So that's what we're looking at as far as the roster right now. I'm not sure how. My assumption is that the team's website, the team's social media is who's going to kind of keep us apprised of how cuts go. Now, it may just be one big cut because, we're only going from 35 to 24, so that's only 11 guys you got to cut. But it may just be one big cut April 20th, and then the kickoff is shortly thereafter as far as the first game goes. Other big news in the Arena League this week since last time we talked to you, we have a name for Atlantic City. We can quit just calling them the Atlantic City franchise. They're the Blackjacks, which is awesome. Of all the names that were in the running, Blackjacks is the one I wanted. Their logo is cool. It has the look of kind of just a stylized jack from a playing card. I'm really happy with it as far as how it looks, how the color scheme of the red and the black and the gold makes a lot of sense for what they're doing. So I'm pretty happy. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with what they're doing, with how they decided to go on that they wanted to do, that they went Blackjacks. Because the one that I kept hearing from people was, the Royals. No, there's a baseball team named the Royals. You don't automatically want to set yourself back one. Don't do that. We're fine. Blackjacks is a great name. I'm very happy for it. The interesting bit of news that has kind of come out from that press conference that a lot of fans were not clear on was, is the Arena Football League going to have a TV deal this year? And a lot of fans had settled on the idea, no, it's not going to happen. We're 6 weeks from the first game or whatnot, or getting close to a month. No. Well, during the Atlantic City Blackjack name reveal, something that had happened a few weeks earlier when they did the official announcement press conference, although everybody knew it, Ron Jaworski mentioned the idea of Atlantic City and the boardwalk on national television. And I mentioned that to some people, and they were like, he's, I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a TV deal. And then he brought up, yeah, we have a TV deal. We're going to be announcing it here in a we've got the final details we're working out. So this has led to me thinking, okay, who is this TV deal going to be with? Because there's not a lot of options out there. There's only a few. You have NBCSN, but when I think of NBCSN, looking at where they're at, it's not an Olympic year, but even if it was, the Olympics aren't until August. But they have a lot of motorsports, a lot of NASCAR, a lot of IndyCar, Formula One. I don't think they have Formula One anymore. But they have NASCAR and they have IndyCar. So there's some things there. They have some other motorsports they play, so that takes up a lot of time on their airwaves. They do the English Premier League. Now, granted, that is only Saturday morning, so Saturday night or Friday night could still be free for arena football. Here's the one that's going to be tough, I think, for them, and why they may not do it. They do cover the NHL, which, if you're an NHL fan, the NHL's playoffs go into June. The Stanley Cup is normally not done until June. That's almost all of the AFL season. And there's no way that the NHL will be happy if they get told, oh, we're not going to show a playoff game because there's an Arena League football game. I can't see that happening, and it would require the Arena Football League to, in their TV deal, to say, yeah, if there's an NHL playoff game that you're going to put on over us, you just do it. I mean, that's the thing. You're willingly taking a back seat at the word go. Next, Fox Sports. Now, I'm a little bigger on Fox Sports for a couple of reasons. Now, yes, they do have baseball, and that's a big thing in the summer, obviously. Beyond that, they do have NASCAR. But beyond that, I mean, we're talking about they have some motorsports, but those normally, again, more daytime things. They tend not to be a lot of night ones. They do a lot of college sports. They do some soccer, so they have some MLS and stuff, but most of the MLS national games tend to be on Sundays. Again, not Friday or Saturday nights. They do some things with boxing, some things with UFC, and they are bringing on the WWE, so that's going to be a big thing. The thing about Fox Sports that makes it a possibility more in my mind is, okay, so they've got the main broadcast network, which probably isn't getting the AFL. They have FS1, Fox Sports 1, and they have Fox Sports 2 that they need to put programming on. So I could see one of those leagues potentially getting it, or one of those stations. Then we go to ESPN. Now, ESPN has tons of stuff. They've always got stuff to show. Now, is it possible that the AFL gets on, say, ESPN2 or ESPN News? Yeah, I mean, maybe. It's possible, I guess. You might even be able to make a play that it could be on ESPNU. Because, I mean, it's during the summer. There's not a lot of college sports on anyway. And they might play up the angle of where these guys went to college at. I don't know. My guess is if it's an ESPN product, it'll be ESPN Plus, which is the streaming option, the online streaming option of ESPN, which is like $5 a month. So it's not even included with cable packages or TV, which is what I think the Arena League is really going for. What I left for last is what I think might make the most sense, even though it hasn't happened as of yet, which is Stadium. Now, for those of you who are uninitiated on this, Stadium is kind of a new wave on a sports station. What it is, it's a sports TV station where the whole point is, where the thing is, you could always stream it. They have multiple apps. It's easy to stream. It's free to stream, as well as they have affiliates where they broadcast over the air in different cities all over the country. Now, granted, a lot of those cities don't have a overlap with actual Arena League football teams. Columbus does. Albany does. Beyond that, I don't think there is another one. Taking just a quick look here to see who it is, but no. So at this point, it would just be Albany and Columbus. Now, the difference there is the Arena Football League, I mean, you always had the streaming option, and Stadium is free to stream. So the fans in that area, which in previous years the Arena Football League's been doing a lot of streaming, you still have that option. You could probably still work out an option for the Washington area teams to be on NBC Sportsnet in Washington, just because, I mean, there's no competitor. Now the Stadium may say, if we have it, we want to be able to stream it. We'll see. So I'm not sure where that's going to go, but I find it real interesting what's going to happen as far as the TV stuff goes. Now, another side of things as far as what I find interesting, where the league's going, and what may happen next, is expansion. That's something else that's been mentioned this week. The idea that the league is going to be going to 10 teams, 15 teams, something, who knows? People keep throwing out numbers about where the team's going to be going in the future. So I had a fun conversation with Scott Soares of AFLFanzone.com about expansion and where we could see the league go. Now here on BattleStations, we have Scott Soares from AFLFanzone.com to it's kind of a fun little discussion today about where the league is, where it may be going. How you doing today there, Scott?
I'm doing great. I'm ready for the season to get going.
Yeah, me too. I'm getting excited for where we're at. But with still some time before we actually get to kick off and where everything's heading, I figured it'd be a good time to have a little discussion about the overall health of the league, all that good stuff. Because as Columbus fans, this is kind of new to them again. I mean, the Arena Football League kind of came out of nowhere when the team moved to Columbus the first time, and now it's come back and it looks a lot different than it did last time. So as
I was gonna say it's definitely a different league. It's just as fun. It's always it's still the same game. It's always great, but it's definitely a different league than what it was when they left.
And I mean, just as someone who's followed it and has kind of followed it closely in that intermediary time, I mean, how would you summarize to a fan who went from watching the Destroyers when they were here to now following the new Destroyers? I mean, what would you summarize as the biggest difference between then and now is where the league is?
It's a little smaller. There's a lot less flash and not in the game, but in more than presentation. So the television broadcasts aren't quite as elaborate, quite as shiny as they used to be. We don't have the big NBC contract. You go to the Arena Bowl now, and it's not this giant week-long production with banners all over the city. It's just a cool game with a bunch of people in town, and kind of little annual trip for me to see a bunch of friends that I haven't seen in quite a while.
All right, yeah, it seems like there was a big. I'm not sure. Someone who sees it from the outside, almost what it feels like what was happening was the last time the Destroyers were around, you had the Arena League trying to put up all this idea that they were kind of this big, almost major league production, and now they're it seems like they're focusing much more on the event, the game itself, and kind of letting a lot of the pomp and circumstance kind of go away.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Back in 2008, the league was trying to be the fifth major sport, and there was that competition between Major League Soccer and arena football of who's going to be the next major sport. And yeah, they've definitely scaled it down. And that's kind of what I'm saying with the glitz and shine that we've got. We don't have that now. It's the same fun game we remember before. It's the same great people running the teams and playing on the teams that it was before. They're not wasting money is what it comes down to. The amount of money spent on the Arena Bowls in New Orleans and Vegas was through the roof. The production that they spent was through the roof, and ultimately that's what broke the league. So they definitely scaled things down, focus on the game, especially now, focus on quality ownership and just making the product a good product.
All right, and that brings us to what me and Scott are going to be doing here today. I talked with him, and we're going to go through this idea because there's been articles recently and different things come out about, I believe it was somebody affiliated with Albany said something about the league going to 20 or 25 sometime in the future, something like that. So I listed Scott here so we'd talk about what we think are maybe those next 10 teams as far as where the league's going to go. Now, I'm not saying 10 teams a year from now. Personally, my idea is you go kind of slow and steady when it comes to expansion at this point. But if we were gonna go talk to the commissioner and all the high ranking people in the Arena Football League, what are those next 10 teams cities we say would go through? So we're just going to kind of go through our list here. He's going to go, then I'll go. And if he happens to hit one that I've already got on my list somewhere, then we'll just talk about it at that point. So Scott, on your side, what was that first team you said would be the first place to go for you?
All right. So number one for me, and I did put these in a nice little order here. I kind of actually more grouped them than anything, but my first overall, we got to have Cleveland back. They said they'd come back next year. I really hope that they meant that. Now the renovations will be all done. Really like to see that happen. The Q's a great building. That the crowds in Cleveland were excellent. That Arena Bowl they had there was just absolutely packed. And it's just a good city to have in the league. I'd really like to, especially with Columbus now, I'd really like to see Cleveland back. I think it'd be a great rivalry again.
No, I definitely agree with you there. And I put Cleveland number one on my list too. It just makes too much sense. I mean, it's an owner who as Ted Leonsis and other people in the Arena League have said, they like the idea of getting more NHL or NBA ownership involved, which you have with Dan Gilbert in Cleveland, who owns the Gladiators. From what it seemed like, the fact that a lot of people went from working for the Gladiators and they were already part of Gilbert's organization and just never left, it feels like it'd be relatively easy to restart the thing, and the league would want them back, especially with being close to Columbus. And yeah, the attendance has shown up for the team when it was there. They've got a great arena for it. So yeah, I'm in agreement with you there on Cleveland. That's for sure.
And that's the other benefit to Cleveland, is it actually brings in some new ownership. We're doing this single owner, dual owner model right now, and it's great for now. But long term, I don't know that we can just have two guys populate the entire league. So getting some new ownership, and especially professional ownership, guys that already have an office staff in place, yeah, it makes firing up a team real easy, especially when the equipment's all there, the field's there, the nets are there. There's nothing for them to worry about in Cleveland. They just fire it up, say, hey, we're selling tickets this week.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely would agree there with you on what's going on with them. All right, so for me, for number 2, I had a city that when I started doing this, I wasn't real sure how high they'd be on the list, and then as I started looking at their attendance numbers over the time they were in the league and some other factors, I went with Indianapolis at number 2.
Okay.
And part of that is
I had them for 4. So.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So they made the list for you too there. So, yeah, on my mind, we've got an arena. If it's still called Conseco Fieldhouse, I'm not sure if it is or not, but with it being a one-team town as far as that arena goes, you're not going to run into too much in the way of scheduling conflicts. They averaged pretty good attendance when they were in the league. At least from arena fans' numbers, it was close to or over 10,000 most of the time. There's not a Major League Baseball team to consider to compete with in the summer months. And
I just have to get the Firebirds name back from Jerry Kurz. So that's the big thing right there.
Yeah. Try and get the name back if you can connect, because I think connecting it to the old franchises, depending on how that left the team, or how that team left the market, or how things went, how those feelings were, maybe helpful for you. But yeah,
I think Indy would be absolutely fantastic. I know they already have some diehard fans that live there that still follow the league really closely. I'd love to see some of them come back, and honestly, living in Kansas City, I would absolutely love to have a team that close.
Yes, and it's also a real nice little trip there, because from Cleveland to Columbus to Indy, you're setting up a nice little easy travel division there.
Exactly.
All right, so who did you have then at your number 3?
Well, my number 2.
Oh, your number 2, yeah.
Yeah, my number 2, I had Detroit. They've got a brand new arena. The league has ties into the Detroit area with the Shinola guys. I just think Little Caesars Arena, that area, Detroit needs some winning football. That's I know Matt Sock's not going to like hearing that, but Detroit needs some winning football, and then I think the arena would be a great fit in that city.
I can see Detroit. I'll be honest, Detroit did not make my list. Two of the major reasons they didn't is, the last time arena football was in Detroit, it's been so long at this point that the success the Drive had, I don't know if I can guess that
wouldn't carry over at this point.
Yeah, and Detroit's had a lot of change in that time period, and the one arena they've got that is going to be useful for them is I don't know, with a basketball, with an NBA and an NHL team and MLB, I'm not sure. I could see it working, especially if there's good ownership who's committed to it. But yeah, they didn't make my list, but I see your points there definitely on them.
Well, the other thing with Detroit too is you figure, that's not an economically booming area. The people that live there, they want some entertainment, and they can't afford those NHL, NBA, NFL tickets. They can afford arena tickets, and I could see, just if you reach out to some of those folks that, hey, I want to do something fun, and here's some affordable tickets, I think you could actually fill up that arena pretty quickly.
Well, you have a good point there, and I didn't really think about that, because you're right. In a lot of ways, it's projected as a major league town, but in a lot of ways, the economics might fit minor league budgets a little bit better. So you're right. It could work out as a decent town. So it's another potential for this Midwest grouping we're talking about here. Me for number 3. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say 3. Yeah, my number 3. I went back to a city that they've hit a couple of times, but it's when they've been there, it seems to work out pretty good, which is Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They had good attendance. Part of the advantage of Chicago is it's just such a huge metropolitan area. You've got arenas you can get into that aren't the United Center. The one in Rosemont's the one that is where they've been before, and obviously makes some sense there. And so I think it's a pretty good spot for the league. Puts them in a major market, which I like where the league's been going recently with kind of this mix of the huge markets and then the smaller ones. So I think Chicago would be a good fit there.
Yeah, and I love Chicago. That's actually been one of my favorite road trips that I've made, is traveling with both Iowa Barnstormers and the Kansas City Brigade / Command. Chicago made my list at number 9. Not because I don't want them in until 9, but I've seen a trend over the years that cities without teams for 10 years crave it, want it back, and when they get it back, they jump on it. We're seeing it in Columbus. We saw it in Iowa when Iowa came back into the AFL and AF2. There's something about this like 10-year window where people start romanticizing about the good old days in arena football, and when they finally get that team back, they jump on it and they're real excited. So Chicago was last played in 2013, so I've got them set my number 9 team in 2023 coming back.
All right, so we're in agreement there. Chicago being good. Mm-hmm. I will say part of my rationale when I was saying my numbers, is I had this idea that the way the league should go is they should try and keep their expansion kind of regional for a bit,
right,
and stick to this Midwest area before I start jumping out of the region there.
And that's exactly where I'm at with this too, is keep it very regional for the most part.
All right. So what was your next?
All right, my number 3 was kind of an off the wall one for me. Louisville. I think it's kind of that Albany type market. They've got an arena. From what I saw, it looks like it's a pretty nice arena in the KFC Yum Center. There's something about that town that just seems like it would just fit. It fits regionally, especially if you're talking about having Cleveland, Columbus, and some of these others that I've got on my list here, and Indy. I don't know. There's something about Louisville just really struck me as a nice little market.
I had Louisville at 5.
Okay.
So
pretty close.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you in them, and a lot of those similarities. It kind of fits the Albany mold. I want to say it's called the KFC Center or the Yum Center or something like that. It's beautiful arena that is really just kind of home to Louisville basketball. Not a lot of other major sports teams play there. And other than I think it's the Louisville River Bats, other than a minor league baseball team, there's not a lot in the way of competition. When Louisville had a team before, they averaged around 8,000 or so as far as attendance. I really think you could probably, with the idea of solid ownership groups like they have now, you might be able to, really kind of grow that city a little bit more as far as for arena football. So I'm on board with you there as far as Louisville.
Okay. So the next one I've got is 5 because Indy was my number 4.
I'm actually having going back 1 to 4, and I think this is one where I'm going to have one on the list that you didn't, and it's going to be that Detroit issue. Instead of going Detroit, I went Grand Rapids. And I don't know if you have Grand Rapids on your list or not, but
I do. It's number 7 for me.
So there was and it's again another Albany kind of one. Not a major city, but they've got an arena where they have it's the AHL team for Detroit normally plays, but they have a decent sized arena. They've had good attendance in the years when they had a team, and again, not a lot of competition in the area. They were what was the team there before the Grand Rapids
Rampage?
The Rampage, yeah, they had the rhinoceros logo there. They seemed to have pretty good success when they were there, and I think it's a city where, again, that mix of major markets and smaller markets, I think it would be a good balancing act there.
See, and I think like I said, I had them at 7 as just a good compliment to Detroit. Possibly the Detroit owners also owning Grand Rapids, kind of like Baltimore Baltimore Washington type situation where they're nice and close. They can manage them both easily, and it's also past that special 10-year mark that I try to keep in mind. And I think the Grand Rapids fans would jump back on that bandwagon real quick.
Yeah, and because we're there, I want to throw a quick idea I had at you. Just this idea that they've got, as far as the AFL, we're talking about needing to bring in new ownership, obviously. But I can see it being sustainable long term, especially if you're talking about NBA/NHL level of ownership, to kind of have almost an owner for every two teams,
right?
Type of setup. Because when you're talking about the budget for an arena football team, I mean, these guys who own NBA and NHL teams, they'll pay one player, like either they'll pay one player more than their budget for an arena football team for a year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by far.
And so, I mean, a high end, a mid-tier NBA player makes what, 15 million or something crazy. Mm-hmm. And a high end NHL player is 7, 8, 9, 10 million a year. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's going to cover an arena football team budget. So it'd be a line item for them to have one or two teams on there. So I can kind of see with the Destroyers, whether they eventually can convince either Dan Gilbert to take Cleveland and Columbus, or maybe they convince the McConnell family to get back into arena football a little bit and take over Columbus. I can see them doing that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to see Dan Gilbert come in and get both teams. Like I said, just like they got in DC and Baltimore.
Yeah, and then you could kind of be spreading that, so it's spreading that cost, but I can see where that'd be good there long term.
Well, you don't even need two ticket staffs. There's no reason your ticket staff doesn't have to be local. You could run all your ticketing through the office in Cleveland.
Yeah, and I mean, he's already got his setup for the Cavs and the Monsters and what else does he have up there? The Canton Charge of the D League or the G League or whatever it's called. So
yeah, they could easily just add another thing. It wouldn't be any more difficult for them.
Yeah, it'd just be another opportunity for his ticket sales staff to get more commissions. I'm sure they wouldn't mind, and you've already got a built-in base for trying to sell sponsorships, and it's just,
exactly.
It makes it an easier thing if it's incorporated. All right, so where are you at on your list? Because I'm through my top 5 now.
I'm at number 5 right now.
Okay, so who's your 5th?
My 5th, and partially for my own purposes, and partially because I genuinely think it would be a good market, I want to see return to St. Louis. I think that's my furthest west team I have on my list is St. Louis. Like I said, for me personally, again, I live in Kansas City. I would absolutely make that 3.5 hour drive every week. It wouldn't even think twice about it. But they just lost the Rams. It is a baseball town. But again, you're talking a different level. Now tickets are affordable and everybody can go to. And there's, kind of like Detroit to a certain degree, there is that market where people are looking for some affordable entertainment in St. Louis. And I just, like I said, especially with the loss of the Rams, I think St. Louis would be a great little fit.
No, I can definitely see your point there with St. Louis. They weren't on my list, but part of that might just be that they had a minimal history. I think I was looking longer at Kansas City, but then was just trying to figure out the whole how far west do I want to go with these first 10.
Right.
I can see where St. Louis would be a good match for the league because it would be, a good town for it. And you're right. I mean, the Cardinals are so huge in St. Louis that they tend to be. You're right. Those tickets are pricing people out. And
living in Kansas City, we've had since the Command. So we had the Brigade, they went away. We had 3 years later, we had the Command, they went away. We had a CPIFL team for 1 year, that went away. And now we had a CIF team for 2 years, that went away. This market needs a break. And I as much as I'd absolutely love to have a team here, if we had to wait 5, 6, 7, even 10 years just to get it done right, I would absolutely love to see that happen.
No, that I can see, because you're right. If the market's burned too often, it's a lot of investment just to get people to do that initial buy-in again. So yeah, I can see that issue. And then the nice thing that St. Louis would do is it would start to be in the same way they always talked about it starts to be your gateway to the West a little bit.
Exactly.
Because eventually you do want to make that westward push. So that would be a place to start it from. All right, so just recapping the top 5 on the list there, I had Cleveland, 1 Indianapolis, Chicago, Grand Rapids, and then Louisville. What was your top 5?
Cleveland, Detroit, Louisville, Indy, and St. Louis.
Okay, so a lot of overlap there. So
now I did set these up as tier 1, tier 2, and extra. So my tier 1's the first 4, my tier 2 is the second 4.
Okay. All right. So going into number 6 now. Where were you at?
Number 6. This one's a little bit off from the rest of them. I actually went with Richmond, Virginia. It was rumored earlier in the year that was one of the expansion places. It gets a little bit closer to some of those southern teams. It gives us, kind of like St. Louis gives us a gateway to the west. I think Richmond would ultimately give us a gateway to the south. The only downside I could really see to Richmond, again, kind of fits that Albany mold. The only downside I see Richmond is their arena seems ancient. So, but again, people are looking for entertainment. They don't care what building they go to. They just want to go and have a good time.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I mean, they're looking for, if it's, they do look like they have a little bit of an older building there, but if people, if that's what you have in town to do things at, it's cool. The one thing, Richmond didn't make my list, but one of the things I did notice when I was looking at it was the interior of their arena is just kind of unique looking. They have this weird kind of swooping line to the seats that is kind of cool, but.
Oh, that's what I'm excited for with Albany. That building not Albany. I'm sorry, Atlantic City. That building looks absolutely amazing. I can't wait to see that.
I want to. It's one of those things where I start thinking, okay, how long does it take to drive to Atlantic City? Because that'd be a cool building right there on the boardwalk. The building itself is cool. That would be a neat thing to do, especially during the summer months there that the Arena Football League plays.
Exactly.
For me, number 6, I had the. I went with it's one of 3 cities in kind of the similar region here. It was the kind of the Charlotte, kind of Greensboro, Raleigh, one of those 3 kind of clusters of cities in North Carolina.
Okay.
And when I looked at those,
similar thinking.
Yeah. Well, it would be one of those 3, and a lot of that would depend on things like, when you start messing around down there, do the folks who run the Carolina Cobras, do they either have ownership that meets AFL standards now, or do they want to sell out to the AFL, that sort of thing? In which case you'd keep it where it is, or, if not, you go right into Charlotte where you've got an NBA level arena, a town with 1 major sports team. Well, I guess 2, because you got the NBA and the NFL, but nothing really overlapping with you in the summers there. I think Charlotte would be a good mix, and it would be my gateway to the South kind of city for me. I know Richmond's closer to the others, but I think it would start building a little cluster there if you start in Charlotte.
Right. Yeah, very similar thinking on that one. Well, let's see. So moving on, number 7, I had Grand Rapids. So that was your number 4.
Yeah. Okay, so you had Grand Rapids at 7. So where are we at on your list then?
So I'm on 8 because that was 7.
Okay, so my 7 then, jumping forward. So you don't have Charlotte on your list?
I did not have Charlotte, no.
Right. Well, you had Richmond, I guess, so that was kind of your southern city.
That was my Charlotte.
And then as my number 7 city, again, one I didn't think I would do when I started the list here, Nashville.
That was my number 8.
Okay. All right. Again, great arena. No baseball team in town, but you can. I think there'd be a market for it if it came back to the area.
And I know the NAL recently got the rights to the Nashville Cats logo and name, but I've seen some stuff that questions whether they can actually have access to that. But I don't know. I'm gonna let the lawyers for the league handle that stuff. But I'd love to see the Nashville Cats come back. Yeah, Nashville's great. I made a road trip down to Nashville for a game, and it was nice. It's a nice little building, nice little downtown area. Yeah, I think it'd be a good fit again to come back. And again, past that 10-year mark, so it's that romanticism can come back.
Yeah, people are getting more nostalgic than they're anything else there, or getting more nostalgic than looking at necessarily the warts as much. So,
exactly.
All right. So who'd you have as your next team?
All right, so like I said, number 8 I had Nashville, number 9 I had Chicago, so it's your number 8 I think is where we're at.
Okay, my number 8. and this is jumping a little further south, is I think it might not be a bad time to try and already go back to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the option, if you can try and bring back the Storm, I think the difference there, because you talk about your 10-year rule, which I see a lot of wisdom in. I think the difference there is the Tampa Storm were there for so long
Mm-hmm.
that I think the idea of them coming back would be legitimately just exciting for people.
Right.
Because it was around so long that I think some people already romanticized the fact that there was essentially a decade or two of success in all that.
Exactly. Exactly. And Tampa didn't make my list, and that was the hardest one to leave off. I desperately wanted to put Tampa on my list, but I couldn't justify it where the other teams were. That was the only single reason they didn't make it on my list.
Okay.
Like, I desperately wanted to put them on my list.
So it sounds like I definitely went further south than you did on these lists here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to try and do a true Southern expansion, I guess, at that point on it. So where was your number 9?
My number 9 was Chicago.
Okay.
Because that was at 2023.
Okay. All right, that's right. So, okay, so where are we to number 10 on your list then?
We're on 10 on my list. I think we're on 9 on yours, I believe.
Yeah, I'm on 9, which this one was a tricky one for me. Because I had a 1 and a 1A on it almost. Because in a perfect world, you could convince or either buy out the Orlando Predators. Because in my mind, if you're bringing back Tampa, you want to bring back Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
Without them, if you can't get them back in the league, then my substitute for them would be to go back to New York and try and get another New York franchise going in at Nassau Coliseum out there on Long Island.
Right. Bring back the Dragons or whatever version of that you want.
Or, even if you can't do that, something else. I mean, Nassau was just recently renovated. Big change there. And a difference there being New York's kind of like Chicago, where the market is just so big and there's so many options that to have that affordable thing gives you a nice niche you can get into and probably do something there. So,
right. And if I had put Tampa on my list, I would have put Orlando on my list. Those two were a pair. They either had to come together or they both had to stay out for me. It was kind of how it worked.
No, I can understand that. Because that's why I put Orlando with a star. Because it's like if you can't get that franchise back, then Tampa becomes one where it's like, well, then you're asking teams to travel all the way into Florida for one team, and that Florida team to make all the travel out. Whereas if you have another team there, it makes it match a little bit.
Exactly. So, like I said, if one was in, they're both in. If one was out, they're both out. And the NAL is a decent product. It's not the AFL, and there is enough of a difference between the two games and the amount and the talent that's in the two leagues. I worry with Orlando being in the NAL this year that if the AFL were to buy them out, which I think they easily could, that if the AFL were to buy them out and then switch the product to the AFL, people would be burned out because of the NAL product previously, if that makes sense.
No, I can see that. I mean, if they have a year of something that's not what they're used to from when the Predators were an Arena League team, if they get some time where they're like, this isn't as good, they may kind of salt the earth a little bit there for the market.
Right. So it's, you have a whole nother marketing pitch of hey, this isn't what we had last year. This isn't what we had 2 years ago. This is what you remember, and just trying to change everybody's minds like that is super, super difficult. That's why I'm kind of the thought of put Tampa Orlando on the far back burner.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but I don't see this version of the Orlando Predators surviving.
That'd be a shame.
Yeah, and I hate to see that because there's some amazing fans down there, and they deserve better than what they're going to get this season. And I just don't see it making it long term. And when it doesn't, we got to get that stink off before we can step in there.
Well, and that's another reason that if you were to do Orlando, if you did Tampa at the same time, that would help a lot. Because I think some people looking and seeing, I think especially if you could start off with that very first game being Orlando Tampa. Mm-hmm. There are people who are like, oh, okay, the rivalry's back, and that would be a draw in, and then as that may start drawing in a little bit more. So, yeah.
Exactly. All right, so let's see, we're both on 10 now, I believe.
Yep. Well, who's your 10?
Right. Well, I've got a 10, and I do have an alternate as well.
Okay.
But my 10th is for 2024, the Pittsburgh Power. Bring them back. Amazing arena. They had great fans. Unfortunately, they had a bad owner. You know, he lied and cheated his way through, got caught. When the league came up and said, hey, you know, you need to pay up because you got caught, he said, well, I'm taking my ball and going home. And he just left those fans high and dry with nothing.
Jeez.
They're clamoring for a team to come back. But again, throw them on my 10-year rule, make them really want it when it comes back. So 2024 Pittsburgh Power.
Oh, okay. So you're going back to Pittsburgh. I continued my southward push because why not at this point? I went back to New Orleans.
Nice.
The idea being that if you could get this, in my mind, if you can get these kind of these little regional hubs, you could, especially if you stick with like a 12-game schedule, you could have a team playing 2/3 of its games, a home and away, in those hubs, and then not having to do as much travel, which I was kind of my original thought on how you would do with some things. But yeah, with New Orleans, they had a good fan base. They seemed to have pretty good attendance in the times they were in the league. And again, you're talking about a city where, you know, okay, they love football. When basketball season's over, you know, what's there to do? And that thing of there being an affordable option in the market for a sports team. Right. I mean, New Orleans, NBA tickets are not cheap. NFL tickets are definitely not cheap. But, you know, if you can get a whole family to an arena football game and they're in the door for, I don't know, $50 or whatnot, I mean, it's a much cheaper way to get people into a building. So that's why I went back to New Orleans. If you can get the name Voodoo, even better.
Exactly.
But I think, especially with the idea of some of these other ones, Nashville, Tampa, Orlando, I think that makes that up an attractive option there at that point.
Oh yeah, if you bring in Tampa, Orlando, New Orleans all together, with Nashville or Charlotte or Richmond or any of those teams, if you could have that nice little hub, absolutely it'd be a great expansion to the South. And man, I love the city of New Orleans. I've never had more fun than I did at the Arena Bowls down in New Orleans. It's just a great city. Yeah, I love it there. I can't wait to go back. And if they had a team, I would definitely go down. Didn't make my list because I just didn't go that far south. But had I, yes, absolutely, they would have been on my list.
All right. And who was your alternate there? Yeah,
Cincinnati. They had an AF2 team back in the day. It would make an amazing little Ohio hub, especially if you can throw in Indianapolis around there. It was kind of like I said, my long shot. That's why it made my alternate, because 3 teams in Ohio seems like a lot, you know. But you know, you look at how close the teams are clustered over there on the East Coast, and well, you know, how many people, if you put a team in all 3 of those cities, how many people are not going to another city because they've got one in theirs? I don't think there's going to be that many Cincinnati people going to Cleveland or Columbus. That many Columbus people, you know, there's not going to be much crossover.
No, you're right there, and it may actually encourage, you know, people going on little road trips to the other cities.
Exactly.
I mean, I love the idea personally, especially as somebody who's a Central Ohio person, because the idea of I can essentially jump over to Interstate 71, drive north a couple hours, get to Cleveland, drive south, hit Columbus, Cincinnati, and then, hey, if you want to make a little weekend of it, all the way to Louisville if they were to be in it. I mean, having 4 teams in that kind of drive would be incredible.
Oh, yeah.
The reason I see why you're saying long shot is if you have, you know, 3 in Ohio, I mean, the max on this league, you know, even if you're getting into the 20s, you know, mid 20s, that's a lot of teams in a small area. Now, if the whole idea is just to have teams in strong markets, it's probably not a bad option. If this league, though, sees that they have to do a future and trying to get back to like a national television deal or whatnot, and maybe they're not doing that as much, but I don't know. Maybe it would work. I can see some reasons why it would be good and some reasons why they may not go that way. But yeah,
that would make a great cluster of teams right there in the Midwest. Oh man, it'd be great trips.
Yeah. I mean, if you're fine going a little Midwest heavy, because if you're talking Chicago, Indiana, 3 Ohio's, and then Detroit. I mean, they'd be so close to each other. It'd make life real easy for those teams. So,
well, and I went through, in 2009 when the league shut down, I went through and reached as many AF2 teams as I could that year, just to go as many games as I possibly could. Did doubleheader weekends all the time. I think I ended up doing something like 25 games that season. And it was great because they were all within driving distance from Kansas City. You know, everything was, I think the longest road trip I made was 12 hours down to Shreveport. But everything else pretty much within 8 hours, and I got to go to tons of cities, and it was great having that many teams that close. Same thing with the following year when I got Barnstormer season tickets, and I got to, I think I went to 13 of the 16 games for them that year. just because everything was close enough to drive to. It was absolutely incredible. So yeah, having that nice little drivable schedule, just it makes it fun.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, depending on where the league sees itself, and this is what I'm very interested in, does the league see, okay, we want to go national again, we want to try and get this big national TV deal, or is it, no, we're going to accept that we're kind of more of a niche sport, and we want to make it so that where we have fans, they can really get to everything, and we're cool doing that, and we're going to just kind of stream stuff as far as watching away games. I mean, because if they're looking at that, putting these teams in smaller clusters makes a lot of sense, because it is trying to maximize what cities you're already in.
Well, and we all love the TV deals. We all love to say, hey, our league is on ESPN, our league's on NBC. But the reality is it costs a lot of money. And that's just not the future of broadcasting anymore. No. The future of broadcasting is on the internet. And I've been talking to a few owners for the last few years now, and they were ready to get rid of the TV deal a couple years ago. You know, this is there's nothing new getting rid of CBS Sportsnet. It's the future is internet. The future is Facebook Live, Twitter Live, streaming platforms. That's just the way things are going now.
Yeah, and it's I am perfectly happy with that being the way they go. I mean, as long as these are things that are accessible, which streaming options tend to be, I mean, just going that way is a good way to go. Because I think, I don't know when was the last time the AFL actually made money off a TV deal.
I don't know if they ever had, to be honest with you. I don't know that single year they did.
Because it seems like all these years they were having to either pay to get on networks, or it just wasn't making sense for them. Whereas if now they can, I mean, I'd like to see the production quality go up a little bit on some of these streams.
Right.
But I'll say the other week, I mean, I've been watching some old AFL games from last year on streams and stuff, kind of getting ready for the season. And then this last weekend, I turned on some IFL games that were on YouTube. And it was kind of night and day between the AFL. I mean, the AFL games, they weren't, I mean, it wasn't like something live on ESPN, but it was a world better than what the IFL was putting on their streams in a lot of situations.
Right. And a lot of people like to say, oh, there's no difference between the IFL and the AFL, or the NAL and the AFL. There is. I mean, the players are making upwards of 10 times more than those other leagues. That alone is going to guarantee you better talent. Yeah. Nobody's choosing to play in the IFL or the NAL for so much less money just because they want to play in that league. That's not how that works. You know?
Yeah, I mean the way the Arena Football League is, you know, my understanding is, I mean, you can make, I mean, you're not going to get rich, but you can make decent money working, you know, playing in the AFL.
I believe it's about $45,000 a year or so. Take that with a grain of salt, but I believe it's about $45,000 a year is about what a player can make.
Yeah,
in the AFL
so I mean,
now.
that's a living wage. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not. Whereas, yeah, you're right. Guy making $250 a game. I mean, unless you live within, you know, an hour of the city, is that worth it for you? And I mean, it's
well, even if the team is comping you a room and a couple meals, that $250 after taxes, you're not getting that much in pocket.
And you're spending a lot of time doing it between practices and everything else. I mean, yeah, there's a major difference there. I mean, considering that, you know, you're seeing guys who, you know, last year were playing in the Canadian Football League and then coming down, you know, being like, you know what, I'm going to go back to the Arena League. It's closer to home. It's paying me decent money. That's what I want to do.
Exactly. And I got to give credit to the union. As much as they've been a pain for us as fans, and they're taking care of the players. They're getting their players paid. They're making sure our players are taken care of. And you know, I got to give credit to the union, even though they've caused issues. You know, they've definitely made it better on our players, and that's ultimately what they're there for.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. So I mean, I think where the league's at right now, even though it's small, I think it's as healthy as it's been in a long, long time. So I mean, as a fan, seeing the Destroyers come back, it's encouraging to think, okay, this might stick around for more than 4 or 5 years this time. This might be here for a while.
Oh, absolutely. And like I think I've told you, you know, off the air here, that I love the energy I'm seeing coming out of Columbus. I mean, these people are just dying for this team to come back. I mean, it shows in how many season tickets are already sold this season. I mean, and then they haven't advertised, you know?
Yeah.
They haven't done any advertising. They've sold, 1,500 tickets? I mean, that's unbelievable. So, yeah, to see the energy back in Columbus, there's just there's a different feel to this year. There's not this cloud going over. There's not a CBA being negotiated right now. There's not a, we're stable. We didn't lose any teams. We actually gained teams. Our ownership is solid. They are absolutely committed to this product. It's good, right? And like you said, I don't think it's ever quite been this stable. I mean, we had a lot of hobby owners, even back in 2008. I mean, we had a lot of guys that were just owning a team just because it was something they thought they could do.
Yeah.
And that's gone.
Yeah, I had discussions with. I've said this on the podcast before, but I've talked with people who were affiliated with the Blue Jackets, who at one point had pretty much a third stake ownership in the Destroyers, and pretty much everybody who owned the Destroyers were. I mean, there was a bunch of rich guys in Columbus who knew each other. When the league did that suspending operations for a year, everything I heard is that the McConnell family was just livid. They were not happy with what was going on.
Right.
They didn't like because they were used to working with the NHL. Whereas when the NHL has a problem, the league steps in. Even if a team's not doing well, they step in. Things don't fold. Things like that don't happen.
Right.
And they were expecting everyone to be as professional and as set for what was going to happen as they were. And when they weren't, they were like, fine, we're not dealing with this. So what I think could happen is if you have a year or two of the Destroyers in Columbus looking good and doing things, that's another potential ownership group that may step in and want to be a part of what's happening.
And that'd be a great ownership to have. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Scott, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks for being on the show today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the season.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Now, since that interview, there was a very interesting discussion here. The commissioner of the league was down at South by Southwest, the big conference down in Austin, Texas, and had something very interesting to say about the AFL's future that pertains to this expansion question.
As we look out in the future, we're looking to expand pretty significantly in the next few years. And as we look at expansion cities, the venue and how it's equipped and whether sports betting is legal are all going to be really significant factors in deciding where we put teams. I mean, it wasn't a happy coincidence that we put a team in Atlantic City. So we definitely want to take advantage of that. We definitely would like our footprint to kind of match legalized sports betting in the U.S.
Now, if you didn't hear that real well, and that came from the official AFL Twitter site, Twitter's their official Twitter account, the Twitters. The thing he discussed specifically was, it's not an accident that when we did our expansion process, we got to Atlantic City, that we went to a place that has gambling as part of its infrastructure, part of what it's doing. And so when I went back and looked over my list, that made me go back and say, well, maybe Detroit's a higher candidate than I thought originally. Just kind of an addendum to that conversation, and that while gambling isn't really a big thing in Detroit proper, you do have right across the river from them in Windsor, you have a lot of legalized gambling. And if the AFL sees the potential to make relationships with the legalized gambling on the other side of Windsor there, you may see another team in Detroit sooner than we think. So again, do want to thank everyone for listening to the show. Again, this is the BattleStations podcast, part of AFL Fan Zone there, and thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to BattleStations.